All right, man. I didn't expect this, but I probably should have. It's a really special day for me, and I just think back to my earliest conversations with Paul, and it's kind of a cool story, actually. I get Seahorse magazine, and they have these cool boats on the cover and stuff, and you're like, oh yeah, that'd be cool. And a few years back, this is probably 30 years ago or a little bit more, there was this class called the Mount Gay 30 that was kind of meant to be this offshore capable 30-footers, water ballasted boats. I'm like, oh yeah, that's cool. I think I want to do that, And there was one in San Francisco, and Paul and I went down and sailed it. And we're like, oh yeah, that was kind of cool, but man, we could do a whole lot better. And that's how Ripple was born. Was that Paul took this project of how can we have an offshore capable small keel boat that's cheap and fun and fast, and he just designed a boat that was 10 times better than at that time was the standard, So I was like, oh yeah, that worked out really good. And over the years, Paul and I have continued to, every now and then, we just call each other and talk about sailing, and, we've, over the years, just kind of formed what started out as more of a professional relationship has become a personal relationship where we really are, Paul is my guy who, if I want a question answered and I just want to talk about sailing, he's the one that I call. And every now and then he calls me too, so that makes me feel good. Anyways, Paul's going to talk for a few minutes on some of his design work over the years. And then there'll be a short Q&A, so save up your questions. And then after that, some of any of the other Riptide owners will have an opportunity to say a few words about, their experiences. And then at the end, we're just going to open it up to anybody else who wants to say whatever they want. So that's the program for tonight. We're hoping to be finished by around 6-ish, and that's where we all are at. So before we get started, I just, from the bottom of my heart, thank you to all of you for coming tonight. It means so much to me to see the support for this kind of sailing in Seattle, and yeah, I'm really, really proud. Thank you, and Paul Beiker.
Thanks, Jonathan.
Thank you.
Let's see, we're going to pick this thing up because we're going to tend to wander. Thanks a lot, everybody, for coming here. When Jonathan first talked about doing this event, I sort of, not too good at, complicated events and things, organized things, and I thought, oh, well, we might get, 5 boats down here and 25 people, and anyway, it's been great seeing all the faces from people I've dealt with over the years that have been, a big part of what's made the design work that we've done possible, and it's really neat to see it happening right here, because this is where my learning really started. Was, well, more accurately, right down there on the dinghy docks, but this place has been pretty important to the course of my life, and so it's cool to see you all here. So I put together. Jonathan asked me to do a little bit of a presentation, and so I kind of put together some pictures that is just basically a rough timeline of my design work in sailboats, and as I've looked around at the boats and seen the faces again of all the people that I've dealt with over the years, I've realized that this slideshow isn't in perfect order, but I'll use it as a starting point. So the pictures here are basically at the very beginning of my work on yachts. I'd moved up to Seattle and built my first boat, which was that plywood kind of sport boat type thing, but it was sort of before there were sport boats. And I built that, and at the same time I had started sailing 14s down here, so I was sailing that boat with a lot of my 14 friends. I think I see two of the guys that are on the boat with me there. I have seen today. There's Chris Bundy, and there's Chris, and then Ken Monahan. I think I saw him earlier, but anyway, that project was powered a lot by what I've learned in the 14s, and that's my first little shop in Ballard. That's down by the Ballard Bridge, pretty close to where Trader Joe's is now. My little shitstorm of a shop where I learned about composites. Because the funny thing is, I didn't learn anything about composites in university. I just had standard naval architecture training, and how to design things in steel and aluminum. But in 14s is where I learned. 14s is where I learned about composites and really about design as well. The being able to sail the thing, think about it, design the thing, then build the thing, and then go put it in the water and sail it. That's like something that is not part of most people's design training. Almost none of the designers that I met over the years, have that background. So, when you're the guy that designs it, and then you have to build it, and you design something that was hard to build, and you're struggling, and then you only have one person to blame. Like that's really the best design training you can have, and it really was a big part of why I got called into doing America's Cup work, was just having that integration between knowing how to design something that can get built well. Let's see. These are parts on the 14. One of the big things that I did on the 14s was I came up with an idea of putting the lifting hydrofoils on the rudders, which still nobody's done it on any of the other classes yet. It's pretty funny. But instead of putting them, traditionally if you put wings on a rudder, you'd put them down on the tip, because that's sort of what looks right. But on a 14, it turned out, if you put them up close to the water surface, they affect the wave pattern on the boat and lower the overall drag on the boat. So it was actually quite a bit faster to put the foils up closer to the water surface. And it was actually those we built those, and Chris and Jamie Hansler went out and won the worlds in one of the boats that we put the hydrofoils on, and that kind of launched my technical work. That's
Thanks, Paul.
yeah.
Well,
But
now I'm going forward, but I mean, how did you figure that out? How did you figure out to,
oh, it was just thinking. Well, I got on the computer. I got on the computer, and you could, from being on the 14, steering it, you sort of know what the waves look like in the stern. and then I could kind of get on the computer and sketch where I thought the flow lines, what the angles of the flow lines, so you could kind of pick the place in depth where you're still getting some up angle of attack on the foil, but not so close to the water surface that you're increasing wave drag. And so it's pretty funny, you know, like here, this is, I think, 9 years later, I got to talk one of my America's Cup guys to do a simple CFD model of it, and he tried it higher and he tried it lower, and it didn't get better. So it was, you know, so we weren't that far off. So this is basically the first keel boat I designed is Rocket Science. That's down there, and Rocket Science is the only boat I've designed that's a pure cruising boat, and it's also the largest boat that I've designed. But it's funny that it was also the first boat I designed. And George saw the picture of the red boat on the cover of Northwest Yachting, and for some reason in his head he saw that and thought, that's the guy I should have designed me a cruising boat. But you know, George is a pretty creative guy, and I know, I saw him. That's why but he's a creative sort of stream of consciousness guy, and he kind of let me rip on it, and
So to speak.
yeah. But that boat there's still things about that boat that are, pretty cool and pretty different. You know, the keel structure is really different, and the way the mast steps on it, and the hull shape is neat. You know, a light boat that doesn't pound upwind. It's some pictures of Rocket Science. I think there had been a few double ruddered boats up at that point, but it was one of the early ones, and an early carbon mast boat. Let's see. This is kind of touchy, this thing. God. Woo. Jeez. So Jonathan saw the 55 started and approached me asking about to do a boat that was fast and didn't require a bunch of crew for just pure ballast, and remember going down and going on that Sticky Fingers, the English Mount Gay 30, but it was just super high wetted surface, and it just felt sort of sluggish. And we looked at canting keel and looked at water ballast, and really all on the water ballast sort of made the most sense to me, especially in a place with windward lewards like here. You know, it's pretty nice to be able to get rid of that displacement downwind and in light air. And so we did the 35, and I can't remember. Jonathan, was Rocket Science and Dark Star or in Ripple in the shed at the same time? Seems like they were almost overlapped.
They were.
Yeah.
Yep. The Rocket Science started a little sooner, but we built the Riptide pretty fast, the 35, and we took it out of the shed before it was truly finished. So.
Yeah. It was a fun project because I had my shop where I was building the 14s, and so I built a lot of the pieces, and I remember the bow, the stem, and the keel trunk we took out of we scavenged a old Ultimate 30.
We were on a pretty extreme limited budget.
Yeah.
I asked Paul to do some things that he was not all that comfortable doing. like using other boats' parts and stuff like that.
Yeah. And I think he wanted to use the keel from the Ultimate 30, and I kind of got far enough down the track that we got the trunk in the boat, but then I was too nervous to put that keel
And
on.
we got
so,
Eric Benson to build the keel finally.
Yeah.
He did a great job.
Yeah. Then the other pictures of the Ripple and Terremoto to the left there. But they're neat boats, you know. It's still, you know, they're a combination of sort of fine, but you know, you know, they're fine enough that they're good in light air, but they can get up and go in a breeze. And you know, they're finer in the bow than I do now, but there's times, like I still see those boats sailing where, you know, they're like, you look at that hull shape and think it's still pretty darn good. If so that, well, you know, like a lot of times you look at what you did and you see where your mistakes were, but there's, you know, like I wouldn't do the 35s again exactly like they are, but then I look at them and they're still good at what they do. So then Jonathan rolled over into asking me to design a bigger boat. I think I did a design of a 41 for a guy down in California that he pulled the plug on, and then that design rolled into the Dark Star. So basically that is the biggest boat we could put under a FAR 40 rig. And that was how it started. There was a FAR 40 rig that had gotten cut 1 inch too short or something, and we figured out how to get it into the boat, and it lived off old FAR 40 sails for a long time. And
Another highly budgeted.
yeah.
Sorry, Paul.
Yeah. But it's a good, you know, it's been a good all-arounder, and probably the second cruisiest boat that I've designed, that as far as being able to, you know, being a true racer cruiser, you know,
And
Dark
what's
Star.
cool over the years is how we've continued to take developments in, you know, the industry and apply them to Dark Star and continue to improve the boat over the years, which has been really fun.
Yeah.
With Paul's help, you've done a bunch of things that have just made it easier to sail, faster, and more fun. And so,
I think we're on Brett
Yeah.
Bowsprit number 4.
Yeah, yeah, and I was looking at the, you know, the pin-headed main. Oh, it doesn't look like that anymore. But, more pictures of Dark Star. A lot of good times over the years with a lot of the people I see in the room here. And then after Dark Star was Strum, and Strum is really in the vein of Dark Star. You know, it's 49 feet, and you know, same builder. Franklin's down in Christchurch, New Zealand, and you know, pretty similar program on the rig and stuff. It quietly lives up in Vancouver. Then about that time, Phil Jameson, a guy I knew, he was a bowman on the first America's Cup campaign I worked on. He asked me to design a sport boat for him, and I did the upper right one, that was a pretty cool boat. Again, like that one has a sweet hull, like a good all-rounder, and it's still being sailed down in New Zealand. And then I did a more radical, shorter boat for him, and that's below. This is the Trinado, was also done around that time. That's Charlene and I. She was good at, my wife Charlene back in the corner. She had a feel for helming that boat, so I could just do the trimming and Charlene at helm. But that boat was done with a friend of mine from Port Townsend, Russell Brown, who's he's somebody you know, is one of those hit gems that's out there. Russell's one of the best, like lightweight, beautiful wooden boat builders that I know, and that boat's worth looking at if you ever see it up close. You get to see it. Then we did longboard, which was an update to the 35. That was Peter Salisbury from Vancouver wanted a 35, and I wanted to update the design, so it's kind of a more powerful version of the 35, and it's been interesting to see the two boats together. Like the first 35 in this boat is like any of the modern design tools and VPPs would tell you longboard would be quite a bit faster, and probably all the rating rule systems would tell you that. But there's it's funny, there's a bit of a subtlety in the design tools don't show you the downsides of powerful boats. So that's but I mean she performs great and stuff, but it is kind of interesting to see how close it is between the first 35s and that 35.
What'd you change, Paul?
It's like more full in the bow, more powerful hull. That's the primary thing. It's just it's more riding moment. It's still fine in the wetted surface, like in light air. It's not, usually powerful hulls go with more wetted surface, but you can see, like in these sections, I've always been pretty hesitant to make, flat boats that drag a lot of wetted surface when they're more upright.
Could you comment on the retractable propeller?
Oh yeah, well that was a cool part of that boat. Yeah, that was I didn't do pictures of it in here, but it has a really cool it's not that simple to build, but mechanically it's simple.
What does it do?
Well, it has a retracting drive, like the whole propeller and everything pulls up flush. If you want to see one down here, the Peter Heppel's 30, the Riptide 30 has one in it, and there. Terremoto. Oh, that's right. We put one in Terremoto too. Yeah. Terremoto didn't go in the water with one, but then it got one. Yeah. Well, then we did the Shilshol 27 that you'll see down here. I don't know, Dean, are you in the room? Okay, yeah. Dean is my partner, Eric's uncle, and he was going to build a little Farrier trimaran, and we talked him into doing this boat, a monohull. We thought it would be way easier to build. I'm not sure it was, but it was a super fun project to do, because it was both Eric and I wanted to do a boat that's sort of a new interpretation of what a home built small family cruiser would be like, and that was the boat we thought. And I watched my partner Eric go into the design of this thing, and it's the first boat that we computer designed in great detail. Like the computer model of this boat is the boat. Like if you look close at that, you'll see pretty much everything's in there, and from this boat on, this is how we designed boats. You know, another, Fujin is fully designed like this, and it's like when you design a boat at that level of detail, it's like everything starts taking on a reality, because you're really defining the geometry. It's not just an indicative sketch. So that was, a shot at what a little family cruiser, like a modern Thunderbird or Coronado 25 type boat would look like. And these are the mysterious Riptide 25s. They're out there. They're out in the wild. They're waiting to come out. You can see.
I believe.
Yeah, it's going to happen. The good news about the taking your time with these is we've never designed to a rating rule, so the boat's still going to be a fast boat when it goes in the water. The rating rules weren't part of it, so it's I think it's going to be okay that Simon has taken how many years, do you think? Yeah, I think he started building parts a long time ago, but he's one of the great. He's a really good composite boat builder, up in Port Townsend, and he's had a lot of other projects come and go along the way. So he's slowly been tickling this along. And there's two of them up there, Brent's and Simon's. I think Brent's is going to hit the water first, it looks like. But I'm looking forward to seeing those things in the water, because I think they'll be neat again in the vein of being a boat that you can can race and cruise. That's the 25 next to the Riptide 35-2. You can see they've kind of they're in a similar vein. Well, so here's blue. So that's blue. Blue is a development of the sort of the Riptide 35 concept. Michael Shaendorf, that came all the way from Milwaukee to come out here, came to us to design the boat. He'd sailed a bunch on Dark Star and sort of liked the way that boat sails, and so blue is kind of a turboed version of that, and a little bit towards the little bit more oriented towards racing side, but still with an interior that it's a cruisable boat, and nothing goes downwind like Blue and Breeze, as far as I can tell. It's pretty quick.
Thank you, Paul.
Yeah.
Really appreciate it.
But here's some pictures of Blue out sailing. The twin rudders on Blue have been kind of fun to play with. Wait, sorry about that. There. The next one was something totally different, which was super interesting. The first time I met Greg was down right in the middle of the America's Cup down in San Francisco. Like, we were in the serious throes of the middle of that regatta. And Greg, and I can't remember who else was with the party. That you guys were. Yeah, you were down for Big Boat Series, and yeah, so I was seriously in the rabbit hole during that. But I remember they came through and we gave them a tour of the shed. It was kind of cool in that campaign. Like, Oracle was not being secretive. Like, Team New Zealand was being super secretive, and the most memorable visitor I had was Scott from CSR and what I'm pretty sure was a hooker came in. and I'm down, like, I'm working, no, I'm pretty sure, but, so I've got my head down, I'm like shaping the rudder, to rudder elevator intersections. I was working on the shaping of the rudder elevators, and I hear this hi from behind me, and I look up, and all I see are these like stiletto shoes and leg, and then I realize, like, oh, I'm not supposed to be looking up, and then
Just a peek.
yeah, and anyway, so it was fairly memorable times, but I remember Greg and his group coming through there, and I gave them the tour, showing them what we were doing, and then I can't remember how much longer it was. It was maybe 5 or 6 months later or something. It wasn't that much later than that. You approached me to
Looking for a fast multi-hull.
yeah. So Greg wanted a fast multi-hull to race in the Caribbean, and this is what we gave him, which was an interesting process, because Greg just set the tone of what in general he was looking for, and he let us go. It's sort of like George Thurtle did with the 55, and I really appreciated that. I think I'm still super proud of the boat, and yeah. But
Structurally solid, as fast as you said.
yeah, the downside is that when you design something that's challenging like that, like the boats like that for a reason, but people either loved it or hated it. Like they either thought it was the ugliest thing or thought it was so cool, and I never get anything in between. Like people are telling me still that, like, I have people telling me that it's the coolest multi-hull they've seen, and then then you get the other ones. But anyway, I was pretty proud of that project. That's Fujin at full tilt. Again. Yeah. So that was our first catamaran design. And I had to throw this picture in. So we flipped it in the Caribbean 600, which I had a big part of doing, because I was the one on the main sheet. But that said, it actually, I wanted to put this up there because a lot of times the things that seem like they're the biggest downers, and I'm sure it's a big downer for the cost of flipping it and everything, but the way we came out of that, like we got it to shore in fairly dicey conditions, and then I stayed there with Gina and Andrew and the locals from Saba Island, and we had all these sort of Caribbean sort of pirate type guys that just wanted to do the salvage, and you just knew they were going to screw you. And so just with a small group of people, we figured out how we're going to get her upright, and we and we did it in a pretty smooth way. So it actually was one of the biggest engineering challenges of my life, like to figure out how with what we have available on this little island, how we're going to get this boat back upright without damaging it or damaging any of the people that are doing the work, and it really, it was quite a process, but it went smoothly. We put ropes from the shore down under the boat to the transom, because it wasn't very deep. So like this could easily go, you know, when we flip, people wanted to flip it this way, but it takes way more work to flip it side to side than fore and aft. So we put these weights, or not weights, but floats, they're dive floats off the lift bags off the aft beams. So I calculated how much the boat would go below the water when it was balanced on those. And we had two lines tied to the stern of the boat that were hooked to a truck, which was around where these pelicans were, which could start driving this way. And then we had a crane that was picking the boat up from, I can't remember, it's like around the forward beams or something, I think we did. And so we just kind of lifted the bow and pulled the stern back underneath it, and then it fell down on the other side, and just like that. It was, but it was a, and structurally the boat was, you know, was intact. So that's the Eagle 53, which we were asked to design for these guys on the East Coast, and it's kind of it was cool. It was built kind of like an America's Cup boat, all high temperature pre-preg. But the cool thing on that was this wing mast. That's Randy Smythe there. It was Randy Smythe's idea, was this wing mast with a soft sail behind it, like trying to do what we were doing with the wings on the race boats, but something that the way it was set up, it had a fitting at the top that allowed the wing could just feather in the wind all the way around. But anyway, it worked. They've sailed to the Caribbean and back 3 times or something, but I think the boat's just sitting in Bristol right now. Whoops. Right. That's more pictures of it. It's a little 24-foot Pro. I don't know why that picture's on the right side, but it's a little sailing Pro. There's also my buddy up in Port Townsend that I was talking about that did the Trinado. He was always into Proas, and I kind of caught the bug from him. So we did this for the guys to do the race to Alaska, but it turned out it didn't have quite enough volume to it. But I still have that boat. I lengthened it. I added 4 feet to the middle, so it's now got enough volume. Then this is Pippa, John's boat, which is this was our pandemic project that John Ron came to us wanting a sort of a gentleman's fast boat for sailing out around here, and you know, something that was fast and light, but that you didn't have to hike out from and stuff. And we built this up in Anacortes. It was a funny time, actually. We designed 3 of these 30-footers at the same time. It was this boat, then this is the Codex. This was for a guy over in Croatia. It was with side foils, and it's a pretty cool boat. I think he's racing in the Adriatic. Then Baby Blue, the other 30 here. So these boats were all on our table at the same time. It was super fun. It was, you know, doing 3 totally different boats that are the same length at the same time. So Peter, I met him Peter, the owner of the 30 Baby Blue. We met the first time in the first America's Cup that I I worked on. And my last memory from Peter, until I heard from him when he wanted to design this boat, was laying on the parking spaces out in front of Far Yacht Design, laying on our backs. I had the spins. I'm not sure Peter had the spins, but just sitting there, laying there and talking, and then the next time I saw him was when he called me for this project. It was, it's been 15 years in between or something, 15, 20. So these are the, whoops, what? Sorry, that's really sensitive. These are different power boats. During the time, we've kind of been interested in really efficient power boats. And the first one was this Ultimate 30, which was a hilarious boat because it was the boat that Jonathan got to pull parts off for using on Ripple, and I took everything that we didn't use in Ripple, and I turned it into this power boat that was our family cruiser for like 5 or 6 years. And the cool thing about that is that, you know, it went 16 knots with a 40 horse on it, and didn't use much fuel. So we've done a number of you know, efficient power boats, and I kept thinking like, oh, this is going to be, you know, this is definitely coming. You know, people are going to be interested in it, and it still hasn't. You know, it's just, it blows my mind. You still see boats that are just, you know, burning an amazing amount of fuel just to, you know, get around, just pushing a wall of water. And it's like we'll for sure regret it someday. You know, we'll look back at, you know, these little boats that had, you know, 200 horsepower on the back, and say, we did that. So these, like these little proas, that's our technically they're outrigger power boats. This again is another, you know, Russell up in Port Townsend was the first guy that did these, and I was kind of curious, so I built a little one for myself, and then more people wanted them, so we did a computer lofting of them up for a 24-footer, and we've had a couple of these built around. And it seems to be getting more interest now. I mean, it's kind of neat to be, you know, to be able to have a 20 horse and go 16 knots, pretty easy. Whoops. Wait, know what's going on here. Whoops. Okay. So then the whole thing that happened during the middle of this is the America's Cup stuff. The first, I designed Dark Star in the evenings and weekends while I was working with the FAR office in Annapolis. So that was kind of the beginning. And then I've worked on all the campaigns since then, except for the first of these monohull campaigns. It was the first of these boats with the foils out there. But it's been a pretty amazing progression. You know, I did 2 campaigns of the monohulls, which were great engineering challenges, but they were kind of boring boats. And then, you know, it landed straight into doing the big trimaran, which was, you know, when the gloves came off, it was you know, who can do the fastest 90-foot waterline boat. And that got pretty interesting. Is, you know, we first put it in the water. We built it all in Anacortes here, all the parts of that boat, including the big wing, which is the biggest wing that or at least I've been told it's the biggest wing that's ever been built by by people. You know, it's bigger than a 747 wing, or you know. But the you know, that was an amazing process. We built it with a soft sail, and then realized you couldn't sail the boat with a 30-ton main sheet load and having to keep it up on its feet. And so then we built the first of those big wing sails, and we built that from start to finish, and I think in about 8.5, 9 months up in Anacortes, and shipped it down to San Diego to launch on the boat. So that was, it's a pretty amazing engineering challenges and big, a whole different level of loads and stuff. And then that morphed into, after that campaign, it was like the two boats in that America's Cup had a baby, and it was the AC-72, which was a catamaran with a wing sail. And then when we won that America's Cup, we had a practice boat that was around 45 feet long, and it was faster than the 72 was, and so Larry Ellison said, well, why are we doing 72-footers? So that's when we created the AC-50, and that was a fun project because I got to design most of that boat, the hull shape and how beamy it would be and where the wing would go and how big the wing would be. And so I'm pretty proud of that design. That's an example of some of the engineering work on the monohulls. It's like you do the trade-off of how much non-rule stiffening. As you put more carbon in the boat, it gets stiffer and the waterline gets longer. And so there's actually an optimum that you find there. So you do studies like that, which is it's pretty neat. You get to look at things in that kind of detail. But but in the end, it was just it was a lead mine. And so that's the big trimaran. As you kind of see the scale of it there. And that thing had aspects like the rig was canting. We had giant, 5-meter long hydraulic rams in each one of these floats where you cant the whole rig to windward when you're going. It had all kinds of wild stuff. Those are the two boats racing. So that's the 72, the first. I'd sort of pissed off the lead design guy during the big trimaran, and so I'd gone to work for Artemis, but then I managed to piss off Juan K. And and Oracle got themselves into problems with engineering, and so they called me back. Like my first project was Eric and I drawing all the repair drawings for fixing the boat after it flipped in San Francisco Bay. And this was like, I can't remember, but I think it's like 9 months, 9 or 10 months before the Cup we did this. And so it was all pretty steep learning curve from then on. But we were mostly concentrated on the engineering of the foils on those boats, which were really challenging. The wild thing on that was halfway through the regatta, figuring out how to foil the boat upwind, and then this is the first of the AC-50s that we did, and which was a pretty intense session. And we spent 2.5 years in Bermuda just learning how to sail these boats, and going from doing you could jibe on the foils in the 72s, but you couldn't tack fully and stay on the foils. And by the end of this session, we were going around the course without touching the water in like 8.5 knots of breeze up. And those boats have become the sail GP boats, and we've done a lot of pretty neat engineering work on those boats, on the foils, and we designed these rigs, which you can imagine. I've been busy the last couple weeks after the Australian wing came down in San Francisco. And then these are just pictures to give an idea of some of the details that are into, that's a foil in the mold. Each one of the plies we loft on the computer, and they get computer cut, labeled to go into, so it's a pretty neat process. So this my therapy after losing the America's Cup in Bermuda was getting involved in the moths. So literally 2 days after losing the cup, I had a guy ask me to design a new moth for him. So I started chipping away at these, and that's been super fun, because when I first got involved with the 14s, the moths were sort of like the oddball boat. They were kind of they were technically called skiffs, but they were just, they were odd little one-man skiffs that, were slower than most of the other skiffs. And now they're so much faster than all the other skiffs. It's pretty intense. Like they're doing 21, 22 knots upwind and 32, 34 downwind. And we've got a really good one. This is ripping along. This is this Jake Pye guy, which I'm hoping can win in the next Worlds. He's a good, solid Kiwi sailor with his head in the right place. This is an idea, a picture of some of the, give you an idea of the design work that goes into the foils and stuff. You can see this is sort of kind of gives you an idea of the turbulence on the wing. So you can see this, in this calculation, it's calculating where you're going from laminar flow to turbulent flow. Where it trips to red, that's where it's gone to turbulent flow. And so it's pretty fun stuff, and it's something that I've seen in my career, is that the analysis tools have evolved so much.
So Paul, is that theoretical, or is that?
That's theoretical, yeah. It turns out, you have to tune it up. There's sort of dials on the numbers of like fluid characteristics on, it's called the encrit, like how easily does the fluid trigger to turbulent flow, and that's affected by the temperature of the water, how much particulate matter is in the water. There's a lot of things, like different places will have different encrits, so it's an art of choosing the right settings and stuff. But you assume different encrits, and you see how it behaves with different encrits. So you pick one that doesn't suck in some of the other cases. You're trying to do averages, because you'll generally, if you get one that's really, really good with super laminar flow, it'll suck if it trips early. And so then the other thing, so all this work with these foiling boats, I've ended up working more on foiling power boats, and so things that have happened. So this is a cool thing at hydrofoiling that I just had to put in here, because like this is the first hydrofoiling boat, and that was done in 1906 by an Italian guy, and it was driven. It's a steam-powered hydrofoil boat. And then this one is pretty intense. It's like Alexander Graham built one in 1918 that got up to 52 knots. And we are just like, I think we've touched 52 knots once in the AC-50s, and it was dodgy, like so the idea that they did it in 1918, and you see the guys smoking their pipes and stuff, it's freaking hilarious. Let's see. So that's the Navier 30 we did. That's a pretty neat little. And then this is a boat we're working on right now, which is, this is a demonstrator boat for a foiling passenger boat. So it's kind of half test boat, half that we hope after it's built, it can do passenger ferry service, but it's 14 passengers. But the idea of the boat is that it sets down the technology for, basically proves the technology of this boat, which is the 150 passenger boat that I'm hoping that we'll be able to get out on the Puget Sound and between places like from Bellingham out into the San Juans. The original run that we designed this for is for Bremerton to Seattle. And so it can do the round trip between, just charges on one side of the trip. And sort of hoping that we can take what we've learned from these other boats. That kind of gives you an idea of what the inside of it's like. But compared to sailing a foiling boat around the course, upwind, downwind from 6 knots of breeze to 25 knots of breeze, like foiling power boats are super easy. And now it's like seriously easy, so it's a technology that we can do. And we have a pretty neat system for, one of the big things about worries with hydrofoils is hitting things. And so we've designed kind of a cool system for, to be able to absorb collision shocks into the main foil. I think it's the first hydrofoil boat that's kind of accomplished that. That's, hopefully it works. Yeah. But anyway.
How will you test it?
That's the demonstrator. This boat, this boat up here has that same system on it, and so we've got we designed the collision system for pretty high loads, but then we have settings for basically the trigger when it lets loose. So, we've been thinking hard about, okay, what's this process going to look like? How do we do that? But I figure it's a water-filled, heavy PVC pipe with wood strapped around it, and just run into it, start slow, work into it. And, I've done scarier things. Yeah, but anyway, that's the gist of it.